Oh, I need to find a new intro. Everybody that I see says, don't just say hello, how are you? But that's the best way to introduce yourself and to start a combo is, hey, how are you? Welcome back. So yeah, If you have any suggestions, throw them my way. Otherwise, today's book, which is Splintered by A.G. Howard, just makes me want to drink. It makes me want to change the name of my channel to Happy Hour or Booze and Books with Beth. Because, oh gosh. If you saw my review of P.S. I Like You, you know I did that on the tail end of a book that made me super duper cranky, and that would be this book. I gotta say though, I think what makes me most frustrated is the potential. This book is a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, and Howard was magnificent in her ideation, her thoughts, in her world building, in the way she turned something we knew and made it like LSD steampunk. It was so cool. So while her successes were her world building and her creativity, her major failing was her characterization. Her characters were so frustrating and underdeveloped, and the ones that had the most potential were minor characters, were characters that she really didn't expand on at all, which is fine if they're a minor character, but don't make your minor characters the most interesting characters in your novel. I have read and reviewed other A.G. Howard novels, and so you'll know I'm a fence sitter for her. I think I have liked 2 of her novels overall. I have actually read the entire Splintered trilogy. I am devastated to say Splintered was the one that I loved, and then I really disliked the other 2. While I guess you could say 80% of this novel, and I guess let's also piggyback, her storytelling is really good. It's the world building and the story, the plot that she pulled from her world building were bar none. But it's the characters and the way she chose to develop them to drive the story that made this one fail for me. It was some of those characters that were the problem for me in the other 2 novels. But I just don't remember disliking them so much, particularly the main character, Alyssa. I don't remember disliking her so much, but I felt like she was very unlikable. I am not a fan of love triangles, and I'm especially not a fan of a love triangle where the main character cannot make up her mind. I just don't see the sense in her waffling between 2 guys. Perhaps in book 2, if something has happened to or with guy 1, I'm completely okay with her having a new perspective on guy 2 and maybe changing her mind, because that happens. Like, we change, but in a novel, especially because, so the main 2 guys are this guy named Jeb, who's her childhood friend, and this guy named Morpheus, who is a Wonderland character. I was trying to remember which team I was on my first read through, and I think I was on Team Jeb. But in this read through, I felt like Jeb was kind of a caveman, and it turned me off the way that their romance started to blossom, because it was very stereotypical, very cliche. For all my Gilmore Girl fans, Jeb is Dean and Morpheus is Jess. And so while I did not like Jess at first, I saw the appeal of him later. But Morpheus, he was never a stand-up guy. He was very deceptive the entire novel. And I guess we're supposed to fall in love with his hotness, but honestly, a winged guy is not attractive to me. A guy, in my opinion, with stringy, greasy black hair and eye markings all over and a really big ego, not very appealing to me. So that was very hard to get past because I thought he was creepy, borderline stalker, and they almost have maybe a Stockholm Syndrome situation going on. So just to start things off, it was very difficult for me to get through this novel because of the love triangle. We're starting with the fact that Alyssa is a descendant of Alice Liddell, who is the eponymous Alice from Alice in Wonderland. The women in her family all seem to suffer from a mental illness that takes place around the same time as adolescence. Her grandmother decided to take a flying leap out of her hospital room the day that she'd given birth to Alice's mother, Allison. And then Allison has been in a mental institution the majority of Alyssa's life. She thinks maybe there's like some schizophrenia going on in here, but there's really no diagnosis for whatever's happening. However, when we open up, we learn that Alyssa has this thing, she's an artist. Both she and Jeb are artists. They've grown up with each other. Jeb had an unhappy home life and abusive father who's now no longer in the picture. He also has a sister named Jen, who is Alyssa's best friend. But they have always been super good friends, at least on Alyssa's part, an attraction to Jeb. Jeb, however, is dating the typical mean girl, and her name is Taylor, which, can I say, this is super nitpicky of me, but her name is Taylor, Taeler, I think. It could be OR, it doesn't really matter. But in so many ways, I felt like Howard was trying too hard. Taylor and Alyssa do not get along. Taylor is also one of the wealthiest girls in town. Her dad owns the local skate park called Wonderland, and she just loves to make Alyssa's life miserable. They have fallen on hard times only because of the medical bills to take care of Allison at the asylum. And the one thing keeping them afloat is Taylor's dad has decided only to buy supplies from Alyssa's father. So we have this whole thing, and I read quite a few reviews because, again, there are things that I can't remember, and sometimes I can't get my hands on a physical copy, so I'm always looking at you guys' reviews, and you don't give me reviews. Like, what are the character names? I need a proper review. How many more times can I ask? I need a proper review. But as I was reading through people's reviews and summaries, somebody was talking about how there's a terrible explanation as to why Jeb would be dating Taylor. It's just due to the fact that we need attention, because he and Taylor have nothing in common. He and Taylor don't seem to get along at all because she's really insecure because she's jealous of Alyssa. So I found that really problematic. This book was written in the late 2010s, so I know things were different, but I don't like when characters are together only because we need an obstacle in the way for our main character to be with the love interest. But we're going to leave that there. On this specific day, Alyssa and her dad are supposed to meet her mother at the asylum, which is called Souls Asylum. We have a flashback to when Alyssa turned 12 and had her first period. This is when she first started hearing the bugs and the plants, and she was like, I absolutely do not want anybody to know, especially my mother. I'm not gonna turn out like her. Small spoiler here, but not really. Her mother is in an asylum because when Alyssa was young, I forget how old, 4 maybe, they'd been in the garden and Allison had come after Alyssa with shears and cut up her hands. I felt like we could have put her mother in an asylum for a completely different reason. The scars on Alyssa's hands play absolutely no role in this book whatsoever. This is all just a moment to get into the backstory of her female line. Alyssa decides to go to Wonderland to skate around, and the thing about it is they basically skate in complete darkness, illuminated with black light. This also happens to be where Jeb works. She and Jeb have had a falling out because she was planning on going to London for a study abroad. He also, which I guess he is graduating, he is also planning on going to London, but he and her dad conspired against her to prevent her from going. Her dad, I totally get it. Her dad was afraid if Allison found out that it would hurt her progress because London is a touchy subject for her because that is where they hail from, and it could set something off in Allison, which I'm just like, how long have we been talking about this? About going to London? It feels like he only became worried and wanted to say no when he had a conversation with Jeb. I don't really know what kind of relationship he has with Jeb. I'm assuming it's a father-son relationship. They have a very good relationship because they are next door neighbors, and he is Alyssa's best friend. But why he would take the word of a teenage boy in regards to the education and or future of his daughter, I don't know. Especially because he's going to London himself, but this is why Alyssa is mad at him, because for no reason whatsoever, Jeb just decided to torpedo her chances to go to London. Not really a spoiler, but you can tell Jeb likes Alyssa. You can tell his motivation to keep her from going to London is selfish. Why? I don't know. Does he not trust himself with her in a foreign country without parental supervision? I don't know. Apparently, he and Taylor are going to be living together, so this is something that she reveals to Alyssa later on. I thought it was murky at best as to why, because he just thinks she's not ready for it. But there was real no explanation, not even at the end of the novel, not even when they declare their feelings for each other. There's no explanation as to why he really didn't think that she should go, unless it was to hide the fact that he was going to be living with Taylor, which, why is he planning on living with Taylor except that it's free? Anyways, one thing she can't do is an ollie. So she's like, all right, I'm gonna do an ollie. Can I tell you, Jeb calls her skater girl, which for some reason that also rubbed me the wrong way. It just felt kind of icky. But she's what, 17, and she's been skating for how long? She doesn't seem to be a very good skater. We don't actually see her skate at all. I love the concept of what's happening here, but in many ways, Howard built up characteristics and personality traits and skill sets that never quite come to fruition or have any reasoning for all of you out there who are like, oh, Beth, but actually, yes, I know, and we will get there. But for the most part, and even in that instance, it has nothing to do with her skill and everything to do with Jeb. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You can guess her ollie goes sideways because she loses her nerve. And who comes to her rescue? Jeb. And wouldn't you know, he has to blow on her boo-boo. I don't even know. She sprains her ankle. She skins her knee. He has to carry her out of the park. And then he says, well, why don't I drive you to the asylum, because her car is a manual, and then your dad can just drive you back to work. It won't even matter because I live next door, because they're in a duplex. So not even like he lives next door, but their houses are connected. And she's like, oh, okay. So they have their little combo in the car because he breaks the ice by commenting on a noise her car is making because they don't have a ton of money. And she has, I think it's like a 1970 odd gremlin that she's named Gizmo because she's skater girl. She likes to wear flouncy skirts with the crinolines and the lace up boots and the striped tights. And she's that girl. She's that girl who's absolutely stunning with her platinum blonde hair and her big blue eyes. But she doesn't want to look like her mom at all. So she's going to rebel and she's going to put colored dreads in her hair because her mom's one request is that she never colors her hair, and so the only way that she can not look like her mother is my tie-in dreads that Jen makes her. So she's absolutely stunning, but she likes to hide it all, and she doesn't think she's pretty at all, especially because Jeb would choose Taylor over her. But, you know, she also has to have a quirky car with a quirky name, and Jeb, who is that stereotypical lower income dude from a lower income family, you know, he works on cars. So he's like, well, why didn't you tell me? I could have gotten this fixed earlier. And she's like, why would I tell you? I wasn't talking to you. So they're kind of making up, and they have a moment. Of course, the moment is disrupted by her dad, who's like, yo, what up? I'm glad you made it. They go inside and they find her mom sitting outside at a patio table, and one of her mom's quirks is that she only eats out of teacups. But before we get into the asylum, we need to talk about Alyssa's air freshener. Apparently, Allison had been a photographer of some sort, and she had taken a picture of this magnificent giant black moth. Alyssa says, let me turn this picture into an air freshener. So she makes one for herself and one for her dad. Jeb makes a comment about this moth, and that makes Alyssa realize she has no idea what kind of moth this is. Pulls up her phone and starts Googling it. This is when she runs across a website about Netherlings. Please excuse me as I consult my notes because I need them. On this website, it says that Netherlings are a dark and twisted race of supernatural beings indigenous to an ancient world hidden deep within the heart of the earth. Most use this magic to mischief and revenge, but some have a penchant for kindness and courage. From all the other things that she sees on this website, Alice says, I'm noticing some distinctly similar characteristics between myself, my mom, the women in my family, and Netherlings. But now they are at the asylum, and she and her dad are gonna go meet her mom, which, can I also just interject here? I was confused as to how her mother has any information regarding her heritage, because they have these schizophrenic tendencies, which means that the grandmother, Alicia, who somehow we know, despite the fact that she kills herself, which means Allison goes into foster care, we know that Alicia, as an adolescent, used to paint Wonderland characters on the walls of her house. But the night that Allison is born, she decides to jump out of her hospital room window to test her wings. But all this is going back to the fact that if Alicia is gone, Allison grows up in foster care. And from what we know, they don't have anything to do with the Liddell side, because the Liddells are based in England, and it seems that Alice had a son who got an American girl pregnant. They relocate to America, and that is how Alyssa and her family are here. But they have nothing to do with the Liddell side, because especially Allison refuses to reach out to them, to request information, to use them as a source of information for anything, which also then passes down to Alyssa, where Alyssa is not allowed to interact with them. So I don't know all the things that Allison knows. I have one guess as to how she knows things, but I'm slightly in the dark as to how Allison knows what Allison knows. If she had nobody to pass this information down to her. Whatever the case, Allison is in the backyard, and she is sitting at a table with this giant umbrella that reminds Alyssa of a giant mushroom. They're eating, they're chatting, and Alyssa's dad, in trying to show Allison some pictures, inadvertently takes out his air freshener, which sends Allison into a tailspin. Allison is asking why Alyssa had access to this album, because she wasn't allowed to see it. She just goes into this downward spiral. And then we have this bug show up. This bug is saying, oh, he's coming. He's on the wind. And Alyssa's like, excuse me? Obviously, Allison is talking to this bug, so Alyssa is trying to get Allison to talk to her about what she's heard. And granted, she's never revealed to anybody. She sort of revealed to her dad when she had that first period that she doesn't want her mom to know, because now her mom is going to have the talk. not the birds and the bees, but yeah, the birds and the bees are gonna start talking to you and she's like, I just don't want to have that. So as far as Allison knows, Alyssa is fine, even though Alyssa does feel like she's slowly losing her mind. She sends her dad off for ice regarding her ankle. And the thing about all the women in the Liddell family is they have a very distinctive birthmark. Allison, apparently they have to hide the fact that Alyssa is injured from her, but she presses their birthmarks together, which, slight spoiler, heals Alyssa. They get in this tussle because Alyssa wants to know what Allison knows. And then Allison, who also has long platinum blonde hair, that she keeps in a braid, like this storm pops up and is blowing around them and things are going crazy, but her braid starts to strangle her. All of a sudden, Alyssa is able to get things to calm down and everything stops. Very traumatic moment visiting her mother. The one thing that Alyssa is able to get out of Allison is because Allison says that they're cursed, and Alyssa asks her, why haven't we already broken it if we're cursed? And Allison says it's because they'd have to go down the rabbit hole. So there is this whole thing about Allison is trying to protect Alyssa from something. I had some qualms with that offshoot of the story as well, but we shall get there. Wow, I guess there's a lot that I missed. I'm glad I reread my notes. She does also cryptically reveal to Alyssa that the treasures will show her where the rabbit hole is. Alyssa brings up the moth to Allison, and Allison says, oh my gosh, well, now that you have gone looking for him, it means he hasn't broken his word and you, Alyssa, are fair game. So we are setting things up really nicely here. It's just how they are resolved that I don't really care for. After the fiasco that is the asylum, Alyssa goes to work, and being the quirky girl she is, she works at a vintage clothing shop. Jen is like, dude, what happened to you? And she's like, it was a thing. So this night is actually prom night. Persephone, their boss, uses Fridays to go inventory hunting of a sort, so she's out of the picture. Jen is supposed to be going to prom, and she says, maybe I just shouldn't go to prom and I can just take the shift here so you can go home. And I was like, don't worry, I'm fine. It was a thing. She goes, she changes, she cleans herself up. So while Jen is getting ready for prom, Alyssa decides to go back to that Netherling website, and a lot of stuff happens there, but a couple points to mention. She finds this poem. What we need to know is this is the "'Twas Brillig" poem that is often referred to, and Brillig has to do with being 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so we need to know that. But then she comes across some more script that says, find the treasure. And this rings a bell because Allison had said the daisies are hiding treasure, buried treasure. So she's like, interesting. Art imitates life. And there's another line of text that says, if you wish to save your mother, use the key. This is when I start having issues with her characters. She doesn't ask any questions. I don't really feel like there's a whole lot of freaking out here going on where she's like, is somebody watching me? How in the world is this creepy, cryptic website with this creepy, cryptic text giving me the exact information I need? How is this not something that I should be scared of? Whatever the case, Taylor comes, and I tell you the only reason that Taylor comes is to taunt Alyssa about the fact that she and Jeb are going to be living together in London and she needs to stay away from Jeb. She also has gone to the jewelry store and she has bought some kind of jewelry for Jeb. She does drop her purse and then she kind of forgets about it, which again, these are all just really important things. But one thing I did when I was going back through my notes, so I was telling you about Alyssa's fashion sense, which, not to say it's a bad fashion sense, I think it is cute in a time and a place, but I said once I felt like Howard was trying too hard. She could have been a lot more subtle in describing Alyssa and letting us know Alyssa's personality and her personal tastes and preferences and how she's a little bit alternative to the normal teenage girl, but it almost felt like she had to be alternative and we were just gonna have to accept it. As I said, she'd gone to the bathroom to fix herself up and she'd grabbed some clothes. And so this is her getting herself back together. Once I line my eyes with strokes of dark green and wiggle into some purple, green, and red plaid tights, I mean, that's a lot going on right there. I top it off with a mini skirt over fluffy red petticoats, a green cap sleeve tee layered under a red bustier, along with a pair of purple fingerless gloves, and I'm ready to face the customers. It's giving me cheesy Pretty in Pink. It was okay in Pretty in Pink because that was the fashion. Here it's just screaming, how can we make Alyssa seem important? Now that we've got all those things, we know about the buried treasure, we're thinking about the daisies, which this goes back to something that Allison had done where she had fixed up Alyssa's dad's favorite ratty old armchair by sewing on daisy appliques. So now we've got all these pieces coming together. Taylor leaves. Alyssa sees the purse. She steals the money out of the purse because, well, Taylor deserves it. Her words, not mine. And she decides to add it to her London fund because she's determined to get to London one way or another. She's already enlisted this dude to get her a fake passport, which, can I just ask you, as a 17-year-old, were you ready to take that kind of drastic action? Anyways, I'm breathing. When she comes home, her dad is sitting in his chair, and this reminds Alyssa of the words that were written on the screen and of Allison's words. The dad leaves. In my head, he's like walking down the hall. He's going to the kitchen. He is somewhere within earshot. He could come at any moment, which she does recognize. And she's like, well, it's now or never. She rips apart all of the daisy coverings, and inside this armchair, her mother has hidden things. She's hidden a key, an antique hair clip, a feather quill, Victorian fan and matching gloves, a vintage copy of Alice in Wonderland, and a brochure for the Thames Sundial Trail in London. I forget when and where, but Alyssa had a vision of this Sundial Trail because there's a statue of a boy, and she had a vision of this statue with this boy and girl playing next to it. She's like, well, you know what? This brochure plus that vision, that must be the rabbit hole. Now we are going to go down the rabbit hole. I probably have to divide this review into multiple parts, hopefully only 2. When Alyssa picks up the copy of Alice in Wonderland, she realizes that Allison has dog-eared certain parts. She's also written notes in margins, but towards the end, the notes are illegible. And she's like, I wonder what they had to say. But the dog-eared portions, Walrus and Carpenter, Alice's tears, and the Mad Hatter's tea party. So as she's doing all this, Jeb arrives. And remember, it is prom night. Jeb is going to prom with Taylor, but as boys do, right? He shows up at Alyssa's door and he kind of wants to check in on her, but he also wants to talk things through. They have a fight over Taylor because she cannot figure out why they are dating. I can't figure out why, or even she can't figure out why he's choosing her over Alyssa. But we also see that the piece of jewelry that Taylor had picked up was a labre, which I don't know. Jeb just isn't my type. He's a little too grease monkey bad boy, other side of the tracks for me. I see that we're trying to make him appealing, and he could absolutely be appealing to you. He's obviously appealing to Alyssa, but I think they're kind of gross, honestly. I think Alyssa is kind of icky. Morpheus is definitely icky, but more so because I think he's just an icky character. And then Jeb just is not my cup of tea. But I think he's also most upset because he's found out about this whole passport thing. And she lies to him and she says, oh, this dude's an idiot. He mixed it up. I didn't want a passport. I wanted a fake ID. But this guy is icky. And so Jeb is thinking that, because there's this huge deal made out of Alyssa's virginity and her innocence and everything. And so he's thinking this is just an opportunity for this guy to take Alyssa's virginity. And It's very He-Man, which I must have liked 10 years ago because I don't remember getting the ick from this, but I'm very anti characters feeling like they own and control you without the author giving valid reasonings for it. And then for the partner, for like Alyssa, to not even have anything to say about that, but be endeared by it almost. So she kicks Jeb out. She's like, I don't want to talk about this with you, and you've got Taylor waiting in the limo, so please go have fun at prom. Somehow the moth shows up. She follows it down to her room where supernatural freaky stuff is happening. The mirror is cracked, and she's able to see this boy from her dreams in the reflection, but he's all grown up and he's, sexy time and all this stuff, and I'm already getting the ick. One thing I hadn't mentioned is when she was younger, she did have these dreams of herself with some boy, but whatever. As much as Jeb is her soulmate, this boy is giving her the warm feeling, okay? This voice, this entity, because she is like, oh my gosh, there's a keyhole. And he's like, no. You can't just use the key. You know better than that. I taught you better than that. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, girl. Why are we not asking the right questions? He instructs her, or reminds her really, how to travel by mirror. She steps inside and winds up in England next to that sundial. This is going back to that "'Twas Brillig" poem because it needs to be 4 o'clock in order for her to be able to access the rabbit hole. So she takes that feather quill, manipulates the sundial into making the statue think it is 4 o'clock, which then opens up the rabbit hole. And wouldn't you know, Jeb had actually followed her. Because isn't it every girl's dream for the boy of their dream to enter their house without permission, follow them to their room, and then jump through a mirror. They're both tumbling down the rabbit hole, and they hit the bottom. And this is where we start to see those typical Alice in Wonderland aspects. So we have the eat me and the drink me. What it all boils down to is they meet, and this is what I thought was done so well. So they meet who they assume is the White Rabbit, but it's this skeletal, cadaverous, like zombie type White Rabbit whose name is actually Rabbit White and was in the service of the Red Queen. They do follow him down a corridor, but not before Alyssa finds this sponge and puts it in her pocket. They get out and they meet these carnivorous zombie flowers. So again, we're playing off of what we think we know, and the whole concept here is trying to say, well, maybe the stuff in the book was Alice, who was traumatized. It was her misinterpretation of what she actually encountered. So I thought that Howard's concept was so clever. I really loved that psychedelic twisty twist that she put on all of these characters. They meet these flowers who, don't really care for Alice and Jeb being there. They're ready to kill them. They notice Alyssa has the gloves. And they're like, oh, well, do you have the fan as well? And she's like, yeah, I totally have the fan, because she had brought a backpack with her. And so now they're thinking she has come to right all of the wrongs that Alice had made when she had visited. Even though this makes things a little bit better, it still doesn't stop them from trying to attack Alyssa and Jeb. Alyssa realizes she actually knows how to destroy one of these flowers, and this is when she starts to realize she's been here before. She knows stuff. In order to actually save them, Jeb eats some of the cake, which makes him grow, and so he's able to take Alyssa and in like one step get them away from these carnivorous flowers and over to this rowboat. Something else that these flowers had mentioned was that, oh, she's going to dry Alice's tears, which will then reunite us on this one side of the water with everybody else. What she's gonna have to do is find the wise one / the caterpillar. They're getting into the boat, and at some point Jeb is like, look, my rowing is getting us nowhere. We are lost in the middle of this body of water. We are not seeing land anytime soon. And this is when she reveals to him, I know things. Like, and not only do I know things, but I have been taught. They pick out all this stuff from the backpack, and she shows him 2 pictures of Alice. One when Alice was just out of the rabbit hole, and one when Alice was 82. And the biggest difference between these 2 is that young Alice has the birthmark, old Alice does not. And Alyssa can't figure out how it could be the same person but not have the birthmark. And the thing about Alice was when she was older, she completely lost her mind and could not remember anybody. Also in the book is a piece of paper that talks about something called death speak, which is the language of the dying. One can only speak it to the one who's caused one's ill fate. Final recompense is to appoint a task to the offender that offender must carry out or die himself. We're getting some real good stuff here. It's just too bad Howard could not follow through. The final item of note that they find is a hospital note talking about how Alice spoke of losing 75 years and being locked in a birdcage. Lot of good mystery. They fall asleep only to awaken to this creature, what we've learned is an octopus, crawling into their boat. And he is a hideous kind of creature. We all know the walrus and the carpenter. So this is the representation or the actual creature that the walrus was based off of. And what he said is he did have a best friend who was an artisan. What he did is he found out that this guy was trying to steal food from him. And so he locked him in a trunk and tossed him into the water. And yeah, his bones are still down there, but he is ravenous. A little bit of a scuffle breaks out, and Alyssa eventually is like, look, we will help you. We will help you sate your hunger. And what her plan is to feed some of that eat me cake to the clams, because this guy likes clams. She gets him to feed too much to the clam. So the clam grows larger than the octopus and then ends up eating the octopus. However, they are knocked out of their boat and they're sinking to the bottom. Alyssa realizes she's being pulled to the bottom. It turns out that that sponge she put in her pocket was soaking up this entire body of water, which had been created by Alice's tears. I had a little bit of a hard time believing that she didn't automatically notice something like a stone dragging her to the bottom of this lake, but whatever. She gets it out and she tosses it. It dries up the lake, and she and Jeb are back to safety. And now that they're back on land, they notice this tree that looks a lot like one of Alyssa's mosaics. Somehow, she determines that what she's got to do is press her birthmark to this tree, which opens the tree up. And this is how they then end up meeting the caterpillar / the wise one / the moth / the winged guy / Morpheus. Morpheus, he's got a thing for Alyssa. And he's like, yeah, I was your childhood friend. I was the one that crept into your dreams every night when you were a child, and I taught you the ways of Wonderland. He says that the whole deal with him and her and Allison and all of that is that he had the same relationship with Allison, but then Allison met Alyssa's father. And at that point, she wanted nothing more to do with Morpheus and whatever was happening there. Like, we don't really know what kind of relationship they had. We know what he ended up having with Alyssa, and his aim with Alyssa, so we can only assume that was his aim with Allison, but I can't tell you any of that yet because that's too much of a spoiler. But her love for this human boy caused her to want to sever ties with Morpheus, and she was fine until she had Alyssa. And something about the fact that they are both females, they are both of the same Liddell lineage, was causing her to go insane. She needed to have physical space between herself and her daughter. And this is when the scars come into play, because Morpheus had been using Allison because he doesn't really have access to young children, but he was using Allison's connection to Alyssa to infiltrate Alyssa's dreams and teach her the ways of Wonderland, teach her all the stuff. Allison had forbade him from having anything to do with Alyssa. So when she found out that he was still having an influence over Alyssa, it's because Alyssa was in the garden and she was with Morpheus the moth. This is when Allison lost her stuff and she grabbed the shears and she was trying to cut down all the flowers so that Morpheus would go away. Of course, Alyssa just got in the way and she collateral damage. But this is when they formed the agreement that he would not seek out Alyssa. The problem is, if Alyssa seeks out him, then it's a free-for-all. He can do whatever he wants. My problem is that he did seek Alyssa out. If you want to think about it all, he put that website together. He was in her dreams. He kept appearing as this moth. He would talk to her. He was there. He was making his presence known this entire time. So I don't buy that he did not actively seek out Alyssa. He made sure that Alyssa would come to him. But that's just me. We're not going to worry about that. But I'd say one of the most important revelations at this moment is that Morpheus tells Alyssa that Allison's not actually crazy. Everything that Allison has put together to create this crazy persona was carefully crafted so that she could be away from Alyssa. So she was essentially sacrificing her relationship with her daughter to save her daughter. What Alyssa is worried about or is concerned about is breaking the curse, the Liddell curse. What he tells her is that if she can fix all of Alice's mistakes, then that will break the curse. My question then was, if this was Morpheus's plan for Allison, why? I just don't understand what Allison's issue was with Morpheus. But then on top of that, if Allison understood, and all of this, I guess this was my guess as to how Allison knows anything about her history, is because Morpheus told her. So if she knew that the only way to stop all of their literal craziness, this schizophrenic tendency that they all seem to suffer from, is to go to Wonderland and put things to right, why did she want to stop Alyssa from, what did she think was going to come of not letting anybody do it? If nobody ever goes down the rabbit hole, nothing's ever going to get fixed. So why was she so opposed to Alyssa going down the rabbit hole? I'm sure because Alyssa realizes that Morpheus is the one who smudged all of Allison's thoughts and writings in the book. So I'm sure there's a lot that Allison knows that neither we nor Alyssa are privy to at this point. It made me question purpose and direction. Why can't we just get it fixed? Why don't you just go down the rabbit hole, do the things that Morpheus says that needs to be done, and then be done with it? If you don't want to have to sacrifice your relationship with your daughter, why not let her do it? There were holes. Jeb and Morpheus, because they continually have to measure, who's bigger than the other, they fight over Alyssa. Alyssa realizes the difference between herself and any other Liddell female for her is she's the only one that Morpheus could actually come to get willingly. And the only way anything can get fixed is if somebody was willingly there to do it. And that essentially Morpheus needs her. None of this can be accomplished without her. From there, I don't know what happens. I don't really care what happens, but she wakes up in Morpheus's bed, and this is when I feel like it's very Stockholm syndrome, because he's been stalking her since childhood. He has been feeding her things since childhood. He has begun weaving emotional threads since childhood. And so I can't imagine, like, everything he actually does and all of his deceptions throughout this entire novel, she recognizes, but she never questions them. She never steps back and is like, that was wrong. I want nothing to do with you because of this Stockholm syndrome. It drives me absolutely crazy because he's constantly coming on to her. He's making sexual advances, saying innuendos, and it's gross. It's really creepy because even though in order to spend her childhood with her, he had to become a child, and to physically become a child, he also had to emotionally become a child, so he kind of grew up with her as well. He's centuries old, and he has the memories from when he was not a child, so before he became a child. So he is a pedophile. Like, it's really disturbing. But she wakes up in his room, they get to chatting, and this is the good stuff. Like, this whole world building of Howard's take on Wonderland is very Tim Burton. So if you like the Tim Burton stuff, you will like this aspect of the novel. But I'm gonna have to stop here because I'm already at 45 minutes and we're not even halfway through the novel. So bear with me. We'll be back tomorrow. See ya!